Amber, this could not be a more beautiful Victoria day today, could it?
No, it's pretty glorious. It's that beautiful transition from well, winter's done. We know this, because the calendar tells us that, but it's not quite summer, but it's, you know, spring is showing us glimpses.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Um, and seasons change, and that's not optional. And I think we're going to talk about something today that's also not optional.
Well, in keeping with the sort of, putting a little light on each of the 10 kind of tenets of the Feisty Manifesto today, today's topic is, yeah, that EQ, or otherwise known as emotional intelligence, is not optional, which it's my number 4.
You're number 4 on the manifesto.
My number 4, and, yeah, I think leadership without emotional intelligence in the leader is just performance.
Okay, so when people hear the word emotional intelligence, they might know what we mean by that, but they might not know what we mean by that. How do you define emotional intelligence?
I mean, I don't define it probably too differently than others in that it's kind of in its formality, it's this idea of know thyself. And, Daniel Goleman, who's the founder of, and he didn't found it, he made it popular. He sort of reinvigorated it based on his own research and learnings. And I mean, he gets full credit for that because he really modernized our idea of it. But I think in particular, it's really about having this self awareness. But it's not just that you know who you are, it's more than that. It's how you begin to understand you in light of others. And, you can't have a high level of emotional intelligence if you also don't have enough space to recognize your effect on others, and then to actually have space within yourself to care about what others think of you. And it's not about being people pleasing. It's actually about having a opportunity to be able to see your effect, um, the way others receive you. And, it's interesting. I don't think emotional intelligence itself is about scoring that you're, "Oh, I'm a 10 out of 10 in this." No, it's it's the awareness itself that gives you emotional intelligence. And for me, there's anywhere, it depends on who you talk to, there's anywhere between 5 and 7 tenets of EQ that are the aspects. So, like, self-awareness is only one of them. You've got motivation, you've got social skills, you've got, even empathy. These can all be kind of subcategorized as parts of the EQ package. But for me, the biggest one has been self-regulation. The idea that it's one thing to have an idea of who you are and how you think and what you believe. It's another thing to behave with others in a way that you have control over. In other words, your ego isn't kind of running amok. That's certainly one that I've had to work the most at. And I think a lot of leadership lacks emotional intelligence because conventional leadership, the way we've sort of been raised in the last 50 to 70 years to understand it, based on our age and when we've grown up, we've defined leadership as you have the authority and that makes you the leader. And of course, when I talk about leadership, I really am talking about having influence on someone. And particularly when you have influence, you don't necessarily have authority. In fact, you might not have any authority. What gives you authority is that that individual or those individuals respect you, and they give you authority to listen to what you have to say and to care about what you are sharing with them. So, emotional intelligence is incredibly important when you put that filter on leadership,
Mhm.
because essentially you're saying you got nothing on anyone. You can't manipulate them. You can't pay them. You can't. So if you have nothing on someone to force their behavior, then emotional intelligence and the idea of how you think about others, how you care for others, how you socialize with others, and how you make others feel, that becomes the currency. And in that leadership conversation, emotional intelligence is the most important thing. One thing that is often talked about is that these are called the soft skills. I hate that. Ugh. I don't like that at
How do
all.
you really feel?
I really don't like that because soft skills implies weak. When we say soft, we it just immediately kind of disempowers the sense of what it is. And I think, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, the idea of respecting others, creating space for others, and controlling your own behavior in light of how you want to serve others. This is not soft. It's complex and it's incredibly difficult to do. So to rob the term from PMI, the Project Management Institute, when they kind of were redefining their talent triangle as project professionals, they talked about needing power skills to be a great project professional. And I'm like, that's a word or a phrase that resonates. I think, emotional intelligence is not an option because it is a power skill that you have the ability. You're not soft. You are strategic and you are powerful when you respect and care and listen for others. Um, yeah. And it increases their respect of you, their trust of you. I think it's not optional too, because quite honestly, there's a lot of leaders out there that lack so much EQ, they're not even likable. And some of them have authority over us. Oftentimes you feel this way about your boss or the local politician or, you know, some kind of person in your life that at one point you maybe looked up to or you respected, and then they behave in such a way that you're just like, oh, never mind.
Mm.
They lose all credibility. So I think EQ is the credibility quotient in leadership.
No, I think that's brilliant. I when it comes to authority, and again, this is a little bit of a military background, I've always associated with it the concept of obedience. That authority relies on obedience. That if you start saying, "Well, what if I say no?"
Yeah,
Authority
you
starts
can't.
losing uh, its base. Where what I'm hearing from you in terms of EQ is the word I've always associated with that is engagement. When people are engaged, they're influenced to follow.
Mhm.
And so, but you called it a power skill, and I really liked that because as an instructor, skills can be learned.
Yes.
So, how does one start to learn the skill of power?
Whew, the skill of power. I mean, I think this is also where EQ, I think, is a wonderful framework for power in leadership because power in leadership can run amok. Power in leadership can be that you have dominion over others, and then you use that dominion to control their behavior. Emotional intelligence is the opposite of that. It is, I care so deeply and I care so greatly for these people, this individual. And I also care so much for myself that I want to find a way to foster a collaborative environment where I can support them, perhaps even servant lead them where they want to go. The other feels that. It's not just words. It's not, um, yeah, it's deeply meaningful. And I think emotional intelligence is about recognizing, do you have that with someone? Where I started, which was this idea of performative leadership. I really believe, I know for me, I performed leadership way longer than I was actually embodying a transformative leader. And I think for many of us, that's what we have done and what we continue to do. As someone who teaches leadership, oftentimes I'll have a student, and these students, they're not teenagers. They're coming into, later in life programs. Often they have leadership and authority, and they're coming back to kind of skill up in these areas. And they also come in with this impression that leadership is something that, yeah, that has to be controlling of others. And I think this is this popular misconception. I think true, genuine leadership and leadership that's informed by emotional intelligence, it actually has the opportunity to transform the people around it. So, first of all, you as the leader, if you have emotional intelligence, you will transform from someone who believes they have everything right to someone who knows they don't and is comfortable with that in between of not knowing, but is attracting others to what they lack in knowledge and looking to their right and to their left for people to better them, support them, teach them, grow them. Under those circumstances, the leader becomes the servant. The leader actually chooses this, hey, like, I know some things, but I don't know all the things. What do you know? And then it becomes this, yeah, this collaborative space. It takes a high level of emotional intelligence to do that, because you have to, first of all, be able to regulate your ego, to not walk into the room and go, okay, I got this. I know exactly what we're going to do. And for many of us, that's our impression of leadership. That's what we were used to. You walk into a room and you're like, tell me what to do. In your case, in a military environment, I'm pretty confident those were the rooms that you were put in.
Yeah. And actually, as you start talking about leadership like this, I'm reminded of a story from World War II. Before he was President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower had to send a lot of people to the beaches on D-Day.
Hmm.
And so he had asked his staff, can I see which beaches are going to have the highest casualty rates? And then when he saw which units were in there, he left the command center and spent the day with those units,
Hmm.
getting to know the people,
Hmm.
asking them, oh, yeah, this is a picture of Betty Sue, who I'm going to go home to. Like, he wanted to know from an emotionally intelligent point of view
Hmm.
who he was commanding.
Hmm.
So when he said go, it wasn't some chess pieces on a board.
Hmm.
It was with full understanding. This is what's I know I'm going to have to write a letter to Betty Sue.
Hmm.
And for me, that was one of those things that you go, yeah, I'd follow that guy anywhere.
Well, and no matter what you feel about that situation, because I think, that when I hear that story, there's that's going to be well received, and it paints a beautiful picture. And then there's those of us who also have a very different feel about
Mm-hmm.
that situation. Like, well, then why send them at all? Why build relationship and rapport, and why send them at all? And of course, I don't come from a military background, and I do have family that were in both world wars that I lost, and that also were forever impacted. And the hard part about this is that, like, perhaps emotional intelligence is just a piece of this human intelligence. And I think, I don't believe emotional intelligence is optional, because I believe in the times we're living in, and certainly the leader that I want to be. It is so important for us to do what you just gave us
Mm-hmm.
that story of, which is to meet people where they are, to recognize that humanity is what makes us distinctively powerful, and that humanity, we're experts at pointing out humanity in others that we don't like. That's the easy part. The difficult part is to see those same individuals as humans, to recognize what we have in common with them, not what makes us different, and then to show up and be human. That's and that takes emotional intelligence, because, quite frankly, putting myself in Eisenhower's position, I don't know if I could have, knowing what I was going to have to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would have. Certainly at certain stages of my leadership journey, I wouldn't have been capable of that, because I have been, on a very different scale, I have been that person who knew things were coming that weren't going to be great for people. And instead of me going and fostering connection, I've just performed the role of leader and let the chips fall. And I've had to take responsibility for the fact that decisions that I have made have had grave consequences to others. And also, I've had to take responsibility for the fact, as a leader, we are not always popular. And I don't want at this stage to not have those moments transform my heart as a human, instead of it just being this, it's my job. Right? So many people, particularly in organizations that have been given the title, we just we make decisions because it's our job, and we forget, well, what's the human cost to that? What's the human toll? I think we're being faced with this right now, where we look at technology is coming along to derail our human contribution in a lot of workforces. And how's that going to make us feel? Very uncertain, very uncomfortable. And EQ, or hopefully the part of human intelligence that EQ sits in, the self-awareness, has it gives us the opportunity to, like, not lose sight of the human toll, and at the same time to really care for it, to be empathetic to it, to recognize that really matters, regardless of what you think about the rest of the world. There's a lot of people talk about, well, it's karma. If you treat someone
Mhm.
poorly here, it's going to come in. I don't really know. I don't know with any certainty about those things. But I do think there's something to um, walking into a room, and if people dread your presence to be in that room, um, that there's something missing in your self-awareness journey as a leader. And yeah, and showing up in really tough times and being human, that's always going to make a difference, even if that is the last day that human is on earth. Spending time with them, seeing them, valuing them for who they are, that's I don't think that's wasted on both ends, right? And spending time and presence with individuals. And that sounds a little bit wooey for a business conversation, but I just don't think. The more we know um about the way the world works and the way we are as a species, I don't think we're getting further away from the woo.
Well, I'll be honest. I agree. It might sound a little woo in that soft skill, but I think there's some really needy pieces here, and I just want to just
Mm,
come with a few because you came with curiosity. How do we approach with curiosity? So one of the curious things about that was the outcome wasn't as bad as they thought it was,
uh-huh.
and they are uncertain why it wasn't as bad as they thought it was, but more people survived
Then they lost.
than they thought.
And
That's right.
was that a
And
correlation?
was there a correlation between the space of being seen, heard, understood?
Yeah.
Was that part of why it ended up working out better? So,
And
I
who
mean,
can say?
but this is it. This is the curiosity, and
Right.
me as coach, I love coming back to curiosity because you're just also saying, and I always come back to some very simple things. When you have EQ, you can be curious enough to stop and say, "How am I showing up?"
Yeah.
Because if you can ask yourself, "How am I?" I mean, you want to talk power skill. If you're not sure how you're showing up, ask
Ask.
yourself. And then, if you're really adventurous, go ask others for feedback.
Yeah.
You and I have had lots of conversations about showing up.
Mm,
And if we approach them from judgment, we're going to hear it through judgment.
mhm,
But if we approach it through curiosity,
mhm.
then we're creating that space
Yes.
where you can hear differently.
Yes.
And I love how, and I don't think that's woo. I think there's
No, you're right.
power.
The way you said it, it isn't woo. It's just that a traditional kind of organizational kind of business environment has made that woo. And as a result, it's kept it at the door and said, "No, we don't do that here." And I think sometimes I feel like I'm at war with a lot of human resource professionals. I've even mentioned that in other podcasts, and I'm not. I'm not against HR at all. What I just think we have to be cautious to do is not legislate it and mandate it and make rules around it without thinking about how that actually plays out in the human cost. Because being seen, heard, and valued, it happens at a very human level. And, even recognition, when you give someone a certificate of recognition, how they receive it from you, like physically, will greatly affect its impact on them. Is it just something you email to someone?
Yeah.
Then it actually just based on, and we talk about this in communication. You look at media richness theory, and that's the idea that based on the type of kind of media you're using, it's going to have more um, connection, more richness when received by a human. So you look at like face to face. Face to face is the highest kind of form of rich connection. And then it goes down from there, right down to, the bulk flyers you get in your mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
This is a highly used communication, thing still to this day, even though we are not as paper-based as we used to be. And yet it doesn't have the same effect. And so, if you want to recognize and value someone, and you send them an email with a certificate, it's just not being received the same way.
No.
Then you, and in particular, you taking the time, reaching out to them, and then even doing that in front of others
Yeah.
so that they believe and see the recognition is not, even private. It's a public recognition that their contribution and their efforts have had a positive impact. I mean, these are the things that makes all the
Well,
difference. It
mhm.
takes it takes that awareness to really understand as a leader how we can show up and for the same amount of energy and effort, communicate more richly and have a more positive impact on another human or another group of humans. And I don't think conventional leadership and sort of our professional structures have done that because we've been trying to, we're trying to get the work done. And you need me to tell you you're good, really? Because I
Yeah.
hired you. So, you know,
Well, it's funny, you talked earlier about performative, and the other day, I was doing some work, and I started laughing, and my wife's like, "Why are you laughing?" And it's because I was using my AI assistant,
uh-huh.
and my AI agent gave me all this praise. "Oh, what a good job, Martin, you're doing," like, and when I got it, I literally received it as laughter. You're designed to kick back
Yeah.
like HR, like bosses with their certificates.
Yeah.
Here, good job, Susie. Pat on head. This isn't real. You didn't look. You didn't bother to come down. There's no eye to eye. There's no face to face. I know that program was designed to trick Martin into good job, feel dopamine, feel good. And my response was, that's silly. I literally read it out to my wife. This is what my like I almost wanted to type in, "Stop that."
You should have.
Uh,
That's my recommendation when you're
I
working
just
with your AI. Make sure you're telling it what you think it's ridiculous at,
yes,
because
yes.
then it learns.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I do put a lot of remembers in for that. But it feels that
Mhm.
recognition or any of these things that we are talking about without human intention
Yeah.
have no value, and AI, can't recognize that, and EI, when we're looking at our emotional intelligence, that's our bullshitometer for the world. Sorry for the lack of
Filter? No,
eloquent
it's
on
all
that one,
good.
but it is because we are socially attuned animals that know when we're being bullshit and when we're not.
Yeah, and I think some of us have more, robust radar than others, but because there is obviously a, gullibility out there that exists. And but also I think this is why for me, I think EQ remains this thing that is not optional. And I don't think I think just as leaders, it's so valuable for the individual leader to begin to respect the fact also at a human level, you exist with, um, mental capacity, but it's all based in emotional, constraint and physical constraint, and also this other thing where I mean, and we've talked about the woo woo, whether you call it spiritual, whatever. That we as human beings are multifaceted, and we have all of these systems that are, all at play when we lead. And so for me, the EQ piece is this idea that we need to continue to come back to we are human. How do we feel? And relegating your behavior, relegating your ego is we don't do that to ignore ourselves. Because some of the worst leaders I've ever met are ones that completely deny their humanity, thinking that that's some sort of expertise. It's just such a weakness. It makes them in times of strife just topple because we're emotional beings. What's going on in my brain right now and your brain right now is emotional first. Why? Because it's chemical, and those chemicals are actually creating emotional context. And that's how we function, even in a leadership role. We function in those spaces. You can't fight that. Science very clearly helps us understand that our brains work that way. So, emotional intelligence becomes this powerhouse of opportunity. And it also means that when people come at you and say or do things that you don't like, that you don't agree with, that even as a leader, you feel pushed at, the emotions you feel in that short term, they're meant to fuel your decision making. They are not meant to incite decisions, but they are fuel to help you understand, okay, whoa, I am feeling something very strongly. How might I wisely behave in this moment? It takes self-awareness and self-regulation to really shut that down and use those conscious emotions once you're in a better state to do so. The whole count to 10 that we were told in kindergarten. Well, now we understand that's actually really important. Like, we need to put a gap between our emotional reaction to something and our behavior with it. And this is the space of EQ. And Daniel Goleman talks about the fact that people with a high level of EQ, hands down, have far more success in their professional life. In actual fact, it is that is more evidence. And even in the world of technology, where we're seeing technology is essentially replacing IQ. You talk about using your chat bot, and great, because that's like 5 PhDs right at your fingertips. But it doesn't and cannot replace all the other facets of you as a human. And so the IQ piece is not going to be as relevant moving forward. Knowledge is no longer a commodity. It's at our fingertips. But human intelligence, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, this is where our power really is.
Thank you. That was very beautiful. That was a master class.
I don't know about
And
that, but
well, my
I'll
bullshit
take
opener
that.
didn't go off, so I'm gonna
I
say it
was
was
gonna
well
say,
done.
I'll take that as a compliment then. Anyway, well, that's number 4 in the Feisty Manifesto.
That's the
EQ is
number,
not an option.
and we're coming back for 5 in a little bit. So thank you, Amber.
Thanks, Martin.